It's time for Unit 8, probably my favorite unit, something I find the coolest. Let's not talk about what hypothesis testing is, though. I just want to answer a question, and then I'll start telling you what hypothesis testing is all about. So here's the inspiration. Here's what we're trying to do in this section. Let's look at this scenario. Let's say, hypothetically, I flip a coin 50 times, and 70% of them, that's 35, 70% of them are heads. Now you're maybe a little suspicious. You're saying, whoa, that's a lot of heads that you get from flipping a coin. And you might be suspicious and wondering is this enough evidence to say that the coin is unfair? Okay. So your suspicions were raised, and you're going to, do what every stat student would do, and you're going to run some numbers. So this is what we're doing. And spoiler alert, this is a hypothesis test. Okay, so I'm kind of tricking you here, getting you to do one before we even know what it is. So let's start step 1. Start by talking about my assumption about fair coins. How do I think fair coins should work? Well, what do we think a fair coin should do? Well, we would assume a coin is heads 50% of the time. Right? That's important. If we don't know what a fair coin is, how can we say that this is unfair? So let's start by saying, okay, a fair coin would be heads about 50% of the time. We would expect 25 heads. What we want to prove is that this coin is not fair. Specifically that it's unfair. Now, we're not trying to prove how unfair it is. I don't need to prove that it will be heads 70% of the time, because some randomness should be expected, right? Like if I got 26 heads, that would be perfectly reasonable. It's not perfectly 50%, but 26 out of 50 is, it's going to be random. It's not always going to be the same. So I don't need to prove exactly how it's unfair. So let's just say heads more often than 50%. Right? If fair is 50%, then unfair is just going to be more than that. That was step 1. What do we think should happen? What are we suspicious is happening? And now we have to ask ourselves in step 2, well, how would a fair coin flipped 50 times behaved? Now, this is an interesting question that we know because of Unit 4. If I flip a coin 50 times, and I'm curious about how many heads they have, well, each flip is either a success or a failure. Each flip is independent. This is a binomial random variable, right? If let x equal the number of heads after 50 tosses, we know how x should behave. X should be binomially distributed, with n being 50 and p, right? Remember, that's what these stand for. This is n, this is p, the probability of a success. N was how many trials we have. This is how x should behave. So let's look at that. Okay, let's see how this coin should work if it's fair. So we go over to see our binomial. They were flipping 50 coins. Each one is 50% chance. So yeah, this makes sense. We would expect 25 heads. But it would be not unreasonable to get 26 or 24, slightly less likely to get 27. And of course, it'd be almost impossible of getting 0 heads out of 25. So this is how a fair coin behaves. That was step 2. Step 2 was how would a fair coin behave. Now, step 4, and that's not a mistake, okay? You may say, Jason, hold on, you went from step 2 to step 4. You may have a master's degree in applied math, but I know how to count. Well, that's intentional. We'll see why we're jumping to step 4 right now. Where does our situation land in comparison? Right? We got 35 heads. Oops, let's not use red here. We got 35 heads. That's 10 more than the average. Does it have a high or low probability of occurring? I don't know. What is the probability that we got at least 35 heads? Well, we know how to do that. Let's use this and say, okay, let's look at 35 or bigger. The probability of getting 35 heads or bigger is 1/3%. 1/3%. It's possible. It's possible that this coin is fair. And, you know, maybe I just got the 1 in 300 situation of this happening. But so many things are possible. It's also possible that it never landed heads. But I tell you, if you flip a coin 50 times and it never lands up heads, you would either conclude that it is, you know, not fair, or that the universe is exploding or something, okay? That would be insane, okay? So even though it's possible, it's very unlikely. This is very unlikely. If it were fair, this is how likely our outcome would have been. So this is very unlikely. So I think it's not fair. I think it's rigged. It's unfair. That's step 5. That's all this unit is about. There's a lot of scientific terms that we're going to introduce. There's a lot of formal language that we're introducing. But at the heart, when you say, what does hypothesis testing mean? This is what it means. We have a claim. We have evidence. We test the evidence against the claim. Someone makes a claim. We do evidence. We use probability to say, that's probably a lie. Or, oh, maybe that's true. We're never going to know, because randomness means that so many things are possible. But we're going to use what we know about randomness. We're going to use what we know about probability to say, I don't believe you, Jason. It's possible, but I'm really skeptical. That's what we're doing. So in this case, we started with our assumptions. We figured out how it would work if it was fair. How would it work if it was fair? What's the probability if it was fair? And then we use that probability to come up with a conclusion. Ta-da! So that is a hypothesis test. There are so many different ways to do hypothesis testing. So many different ways. I spent last summer actually just reading about a lot of different ways of other hypothesis testing and getting more and more complicated, but pretty cool. And we're just going to introduce the one. We have like the most straightforward example because this is an intro to stats class. I want you to see what hypothesis testing looks like. I don't need you to do graduate level analysis. Just an idea, an awareness of how it works. So these are our 5 steps that we kind of just did. In our case, I mentioned we skipped step 3. In our case, that's because we didn't actually need to use sampling distributions because we had a special case that was binomial. So that's why we skipped step 3. But yeah, this is basically what we just did. This is what we're going to do going forward, starting with this next example. All right. So the way that this unit is organized is a little strange. Each one of these steps takes a long time. So we're going to have each video focus on a step, and we're going to build this problem throughout multiple videos, as well as focus on smaller problems as well. So this is going to be the end of this video. This example will be solved in the next few combined, and then you should eventually have all the tools to do it yourself. Again, hypothesis testing is just saying somebody made a claim, we found some evidence, we used probability to say whether or not we believe their claim. Let me know if you have any questions, and you're in for a treat. I love this unit.